This is a presentation from our wonderful, awesome diversity committee. And I just wanted to thank Dr. Stevenson. I don't care if he says Richard or not. I'm still so excited. And Saranda Lund, who are the co-chairs for the diversity committee. For those of you, I think everybody on here knows who I am, but I'm Lisa Pavia-Hegel. I am a faculty here, and I am on the planning task force for this. And it is my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and collaborator, Anita Wilson, today. She is the founder of the Awareness Institute, and she is a practicing social worker and a community changer and a healer, and has a huge background working with everyone from big companies to nonprofits to students, to frontline students. So she's actually worked with every single audience, but I think her heart work has always kind of been with public service groups, human service groups, people who it's more of a work of heart than it is a bottom line. And I have always been in awe of Anita's philosophy, which is this idea of change without blame. And it is my deep, deep pleasure to introduce her to you. Today, just to let you know how things are going to run, I'm going to turn this over to Anita here in just a sec. If you have technical questions surrounding the material that we use, the phone app interface that we're going to be using, any of that stuff, feel free to either chat it or you can directly message me. I'm also going to pop, my cell in here. If anybody really needs to call me offline, feel free to call me. The material presented and the recording will actually be available after this training. Thanks to Anita being very gracious and sharing those materials with us. And you can actually email me and I can send you the link. We are going to keep it stored in the share drive for your access. So super excited, and it is my pleasure to introduce Anita Wilson. Oh, there's a handout that I will also be sharing in the chat later. If you can't open that handout, that's another thing to chat to me. I'll also keep an eye on the chat if you need anything. I'm basically like the tech moderator for this session. All right, take it away.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And yes, please relax if you are, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the fact that I need a tech moderator, but that is just so that it goes smoothly for all of us. And I promise that I will go slow enough so that hopefully we'll all be on the same page, literally, as we go through this program. So welcome. Thank you so much for deciding to spend some of your Friday with me today. As Dr. Pavia-Hegel, I will be referring to her either as Professor PH or Dr. Lisa. So if you hear me say either of those pieces, that is my wonderful tech moderator who is over here on my screen.
Except I'm not a doctor. So I'm not a doctor. I don't have that title.
Not yet, my friend, not yet. But yes, please do not hesitate if you have a question to throw it in the chat. So, want to say thank you not only for the warm welcome, but also to the Diversity Committee for inviting me here to present today. I am a licensed clinical social worker and I do therapy. I've been licensed here in Missouri since 2000. That's really weird to say out loud. But for most of my professional life, I have specialized in relationships and anxiety. I also do some group work. And so professionally, I am a therapist, but I actually consider myself more of a story sharer. I share people's stories, people share stories with me, and through those stories, I'm able to help people transform how they think about their lives, from stories of tragedy and struggle to triumphant tales of strength and perseverance. And I like to do that in workshop form as well. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about microaggressions, and we're going to talk about how to transform relationships and communication patterns so that you can interrupt them. Most people that I've talked to have watched seen something that's really bothered them, or been in the middle of a conversation and didn't know how to suddenly pivot when it got awkward because somebody said something that was maybe overtly inappropriate, but more likely was just uncomfortable, and people can't quite always put their finger on why. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to figure out some skill sets so that when you walk out of here, you'll have some techniques that you can use. All right. So as I said, appreciate you spending your Friday with me today, and we're going to get into the content. But first, as I promised, that tutorial. So as I said, I work with anxiety, and one of the things that really can trigger anxiety is people that don't know what's going to happen next, the unknown, things that are unfamiliar. So with that in mind, I want to do a real quick tutorial of this Zoom platform that we are all looking at each other on. First thing I want you to do is look down at the very bottom under where all the squares are, and you should see something that says mute, stop video, and possibly chat. That is your menu bar in Zoom. And if you don't see a lot of icons or things there, then you might see the word more, or you might see 3 dots. If you click those 3 dots, you'll get the full menu for Zoom. There are 3 things in this menu that are really important. One is the mute. So as you're talking, as you are all looking at your screens, you notice your mute is on. So that means we cannot hear you. I appreciate that. There will be times when I do invite people to unmute and just speak up. But for the most part, if we could keep everything muted so that we don't have background noise coming through and distracting folks. Sometimes we are not all having the same clarity in our headphones or our mics. So you may not always know how much is bleeding through from your background. So being on mute is perfect. The other thing that you're going to need to see on your menu screen is the chat button. It's a little text bubble, if you'll see it. And there you can put things into the chat. And as we just see that, Lisa put her phone number in there, so you can text her if something isn't working. When you're in the chat, there is a list of names, and you can see that's a pull-down menu. So right now, mine says everyone. So anything that I type will go out to everybody once I hit send. If you want to send something specifically to Professor PH, pull down that little menu in the chat box, and you can go to Lisa Pavia Hegel, and that's where you can send her a direct message. Now, the other thing that you need to know about the Zoom buttons are there's something called reactions. In the reaction section, you can raise your hand, you can love something, you can laugh, you can clap. And that is where we're going to be doing a lot of the interacting on Zoom. So if you want to say something, go to your reactions button and hit raise hand. Now, raise hand is the only reaction that you also have to go back in and turn off. All the others, the clapping, the applause, the smiles, they will fade eventually if you just leave them there. But if we see your hand is raised, either myself or Professor PH will get in touch with you and say, just a second, we're about to go to break, or give us a second, or it's your turn, speak, unmute. So just so you know, that's how you let us know that you are interested and want to lean in. Now, there is one thing that I want you to do, and I would like for you to go into the participants. It's on the other side of your chat. And if you could look and find your name, will you also put next to your name your favorite color today? So if you hit the participants button at the bottom of your screen, you should get a list of everybody that's there. Go to your name and put in your favorite color. It will be under the More button, and you can just put rename. You don't have to get rid of your name, just add a color in. It appears that most of you have been able to find that participants button. Perfect. Now, while everyone else is looking and trying to get settled, I want to go ahead and let you know that I am used to doing workshops in person. I love the engagement and being able to look around the crowd and see how people are absorbing what we're giving. So because I enjoy audience participation, I use a second program that will let us have some engagement and let us share space with each other the best we can virtually. So this is for interaction, and it gives the bonus of anonymity. If we were in the same room, I could look around and I might see somebody's face has the question mark on it, and I would be able to ask them a question. And everybody would know they had the question mark face and they're the ones that needed to know XYZ. But with the AHA Slides program, you will be able to ask questions, answer my questions, respond to polls without us knowing who you are. So this gives me the engagement and letting me know how people are feeling about the session. And it also gives you the opportunity to ask questions without feeling embarrassed or uncomfortable. Now, one of the things that I'm going to ask is that as much as possible, you do lean into participating. It will help me to actually be able to present and be here with you in the now, as opposed to just going off my script, because that's boring. I could have just sent y'all the transcript for that. If you will, in the link, I've put the website to ahaslides.com. If everyone could go ahead and click that in chat, and once you get to that website, you will be able to see at the very top of the page, it will say join. That code to join is capital JCC422. I'd like everybody to try and go over there now, just so that we can make sure that everybody can actually use that technology. And is it possible for me to share my screen? All right.
Yes, I changed the settings so anyone could share their screen.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, good to note. I'm going to have to move some of my controls so I can see the space. All right. I see a couple of people have made it over to the slides program. And I'm going to put that in the link just in the chat one more time. You should be able to click on that link in the chat and it will take you straight to the website. Professor PH, what do you see on my screen right now?
I actually see your presenter, AHA Slides, okay, and basically the two tabs.
Got you. Thank you. Now, why is it saying, or do you have any idea, rather, I should say, why it's not linking that link we just stuck in the chat?
Hold on.
Do you care if you're not participating?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jade is using her iPhone, so that might be difficult for her to do it both on here and others. Yeah. Actually, right now, I don't actually see anything to participate, but I do get that on my phone.
Perfect. That's what you should be seeing. Yes.
Okay, so Tammy, there shouldn't be anything clickable yet, but if you're using your phone, it should look kind of like this.
In the link, the chat in the link should be clickable. Yes, that's what I meant is clickable. As of right now, you should see the title slide.
Yeah, and that will not be, oftentimes it doesn't click. And if you're stuck in a full screen, if you hit escape, you'll actually be able to multi-window again. So if that's something that if you need to resize your windows, that's another way of doing it.
Thank you so much. Now, I will be sharing my screen, so you'll see this up here, and you will be able to move back and forth. I do like to use the slides program with my phone, looking at it there and answering questions on my phone while I look and deal with Zoom on my computer, but it's not necessary to do that. You can use one device. No problem. Please do be safe. Do not try and do all of this while you are driving, Michelle. I appreciate that. Okay. So as I mentioned, I like to do interactive workshops. So I will be asking a lot of questions today. I want you to know these are not gotcha questions. Your answers aren't being graded, but it's one of the ways that I know how you are absorbing the material, and if there's some spaces where I need to go back and be a little bit more clear with my details. So, like I said, if you participate, that gives me the opportunity to actually give you a live presentation as opposed to just reading from my notes. All right, now I'm going to see if we can get a few more people into the slides program, and I'm going to ask you to answer this question. The question I have is, what confuses you about microaggression? You can answer multiple times, but go ahead, if you are in the slides program, write down what confuses you about microaggressions. I'll be right back, y'all. Going to close down my window because I need to figure out why the program just froze on me. Sorry.
It's working for me.
Awesome. You know how they always have the, presenters screen that's a little bit different than what y'all are seeing? So that's what I'm looking at. Okay. I am seeing several of the inputs coming. And I'm hoping that y'all here looking at my screen share are also able to see as responses come in, they're showing up on the screen. These are all great questions, truly are. And the question of what's confusing about microaggressions, how intentional? Did they mean it? Why? Is this a thing? Exactly. So all of you seem to be in the same place with microaggressions as just about everybody. I'm seeing a question about, can microaggressions be nonverbal? Most definitely they can. So I really appreciate how y'all are using the program to start to get a feel of what's going on in the room about microaggressions, how people are thinking about it. I'm going to ask you to continue to write what confuses you. As I said, you can put in several submissions. So while you're doing that, I want to encourage you, don't hesitate to take notes as we are going. The slides will be available. This recording will be available. But for discussion today in real time, you might want to remember what it is that we just said. What are we talking about? So don't hesitate to take notes. And also that way, when we have a question slide that will come up, you'll remember, oh yeah, I wanted to ask question XYZ. So one of the first things that I want to share with you is this idea that as we're moving forward, it might get to be a little bit uncomfortable. And I say that because I'm going to be inviting you to be in your learning edge, if you will. Now, the learning edge is this yellow ring around your comfort zone. If you look on this shared screen that we have, you will see that the comfort is the green part in the middle. It's squishy and comfy. It's where you are familiar. Things are expected. You're not really learning anything, but it's very nice space to sit. The danger zone is the red outside. And when you're in the danger zone, you aren't interested. You're not trying to learn anything. Your body is in survival mode. It is shutting down new information. Now, the learning edge, though, is just a little bit past your comfort zone. And that's where you're able to actually absorb new material. You're able to actually get information in. But because it's unfamiliar, you might find that you'll start to drift off. You might find yourself kind of just shaking your head or frowning. You might feel a little bit defensive, and that is okay. Take a deep breath. All of those are signs, physiological signs, that you're stretching out of your comfort zone. And being uncomfortable is a natural part of the learning process. So as you're feeling some of these physical reactions happening, relax, take a deep breath, remind yourself that you're not being attacked, you're not in danger, you're just learning new information. Okay, now, because this is all new information and it's unfamiliar and we're all going to be on the edge of comfort and danger, I think it's also important that we are mindful of how we speak to each other. So I want you to know that I approach trainings from a no blame attitude. I think that it's important that we are able to discuss issues without attacking people. We're able to give space for people to ask questions without feeling embarrassed, because why would you come to a training if not to learn? So I like to make sure that everybody is on the same page of how are we going to interact in this space. In general, if your kindergarten teacher had it as a rule, probably makes sense here. So, no name calling, no belittling, avoid accusatory language. Don't start off with you, don't talk about those people, don't say they. Please show respect for the people you're addressing. Understand that we don't have to agree on everything as we are talking about microaggressions, but we do have to be respectful. Listen for understanding. A lot of times people get stuck in the idea of trying to argue and rebut, but in this case, I want you to try and listen for understanding. People will be sharing their experiences, talking about parts of their lives, and I'd like you to honor the privacy of the stories. You may hear something that's really important and learn something. You can share what you learned, but don't give people's names and privacy issues. And because I know people absorb information at different rates and people take different times to gather their thoughts, please don't worry about being silent. Don't worry about needing to take some time to get all of your thoughts to line up. As long as you're not wandering off mentally, please try and stay engaged. Now, I'd like you to go back to this next slide in AHA slides and answer this question, because a lot of times people think that I've missed something. So is there anything that we've missed in how we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusions? Now, this is an opportunity if you want to speak out loud and you don't want to put it in the chat or put it on the slide, please raise your hand in the reactions on Zoom and we will call your name. Professor PH, could you keep your eye open for hands raised and people putting thoughts in the chat? People who are feeling comfortable in the polling, please go ahead and add things there. Dr. Stevenson, on my sharing screen, it says time left, 7 minutes. Is that something I should be paying attention to?
I've seen this before and they'll say, well, as a courtesy, we'll keep going. Just as a contingency, if something does happen, I will send out a Google Meet link.
Okay.
To everybody that's in this meeting, and we'll get back on.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's our backup plan.
Perfect. All right.
And I'm Richard, please.
Of course. So it appears that the listen first to understand before listening to respond is one of the most important principles. So thank you. Just to give you a visual of what is going to be expected. And remember, if it was a rule in kindergarten, it's probably a good rule now. All right. I'm going to show you the order of today's workshop. We're going to talk about the no blame philosophy a little bit more, talk about types of microaggressions. We're going to talk about how to move from being a bystander to a superstar. And we're going to talk about next steps. And again, I'm going to remind you, please do not take offense if I continue to ask you questions. That is just my style. Now, I needed to know where people are with this next thought about identity. So if you will, in the polls program, to your best opinion, what finishes the sentence? Identity is. Your choices are A, the important characteristics of a person that make them feel like themselves. B, the set of labels used by the government to categorize people. Or C, a critical part of psychological and emotional health. What statement finishes that for you best? The important characteristics of a person, yes. Critical part of psychological and emotional health, most definitely. Now, identity is complex and it involves many, many dimensions. And so all three of those are accurate statements about identity. And it's important to keep in mind that our language doesn't actually do a good job of discussing emotional or relational type things. If you want to measure something, if you are interested in a scientific description, English is great, but it doesn't have really good vocabulary for emotion. So with that in mind, I'm going to move forward and actually give you the definition of identity. Now, I want to remind you that these definitions are coming from the field of sociology. This definition of identity is specifically from the theory of social identity. And that was created way back in the mid-70s, 1970s, by Henry Tajfel. And Henry Tajfel said, you know what? I think that people's sense of who they are is actually based on the groups they belong to. And so with that idea in mind, some of those groups could be their racial group, their sex group, their religious belief group, their economic class group, or their gender group. Those are some of the groups that help shape somebody's identity. And 40 years or so after we came up with this idea that identity is socially constructed as well, sociologists are still using this information to understand how people treat each other. And it is where we got some of the ideas and basis for microaggressions in that theory. Now, I mentioned that identity is complex and it involves many factors. Most of those factors come from our early messages. Early on, we got told how the world works. And those messages influence our sense of who we are and how we should act. I know that people like to say that they are not at all influenced by what other people think of them, but the truth is, as human beings, we are all influenced by other people's opinions of us. We are all influenced about how it is that we are supposed to act and what are the expectations that are laid on us based on our group memberships and our societal rules. And people protect who they have come to understand themselves to be because that's how they've learned to be to survive in their environment. Now, I believe that implicit bias is one of the things that comes from all of us trying to be the best that we can be. Implicit bias is unconscious. It affects our judgments, our decisions, and our behaviors. It is automatic, and it's often unintentional. And so my no blame approach comes from the understanding that everybody has bias. Everybody is socialized and told what the world is like and how they should behave in it to, be okay. And so therefore, I don't blame anybody for the fact that they know their life story and the story of their closest friends and family best. I don't blame them for not knowing my story. And so as we move forward, I want you to keep that in mind. You only know what you know, and therefore you can't do better until you know more. And so part of diversity and inclusion for me is getting to know other people's stories. Now, microaggressions. You decided to come attend a seminar today on microaggressions. Tell me what you already know about them. You can put it in chat, or you can do the poll here on the participation program. Microaggressions are very popular nowadays. From what I've seen on social media, the term is used more frequently to shame people instead of a way to actually talk about how people treat each other, which is why it was initially developed. Now, seems like most people have definitely heard about microaggressions. And so with that in mind, I'm going to give you a definition. And I was talking about Dr. Daryl Sue. He was the most recent person to make microaggressions a known thing. Basically, he started writing about them in the early 2000s. And basically, they've been studied before him and since then. They started off being very much a racial thing, but as research has continued, we've realized that no, it's not just about races. Anybody who has identities that are targeted or marginalized can be subject to microaggressions. Now, this is the definition of microaggressions. However, I think that the poet Michael Cleveland-Diggs said it much better. In one of his poems, he said that microaggressions are the daily weight of not being accepted. The daily weight of not being accepted. Okay. So these commonplace indignities, they serve as a constant reminder that you, or people that look like you and have your same identity, have the option of being insulted, violently attacked, fired at any moment, and that there's nothing that you can do about it. And whether or not that's factual isn't really part of the problems with microaggressions. It is more about the fact that it is a constant reminder that for some part of your identity, you are not valued, welcome, and that you can be threatened, and that you have very little control over pieces of your life. I bring up the sociology piece and the fact that there's been research about this for well over 40 years, because I want to make sure that you understand microaggressions are not simply about hurt feelings. We know that microaggressions leave harmful, long-lasting effects. They can lead to trauma. They reduce mental well-being. There is a cumulative physical stress that comes from enduring microaggression that has been proven to shorten life expectancy. So microaggressions are very real and very, very detrimental to people's quality of life and mental and physical health. Now, I want to distinguish between microaggressions and direct aggressions. Okay, so microaggressions are often called micro because they're hard to truly put a finger on. They're hard to define exactly what may have happened to make somebody upset. In fact, because they are so vague and so ambiguous, it's often really much easier to leave them alone, ignore them, pretend they didn't happen. However, in this case, these are not microaggressions. These are gushing wounds. These are very clear instances of violence. They are not subtle. There's no question of what has happened in these instances. So I want you to recognize there's a difference between actual, overt, intentional violence and microaggressions. Microaggressions are often compared to paper cuts. They're quick, they sting, you may forget about them until you accidentally brush your hand again, and then you're like, oh yeah, ouch, that's still there, it hasn't healed up yet. And these are gushing wounds, often fatal. There are 3 types of microaggressions. Well, actually, there are 9 categories of microaggressions, and we're not going to go over all 9 of them, but there are some 3 very specific types. So, microassaults, they are not quite full-on attacks, but they are very dramatic. Somebody getting loud and maybe invading your personal space is a microassault. They are very deliberate. Micro insults are the most common, and they are comments or behaviors that convey contempt or convey an insensitivity to a part of a person's identity. Sometimes those are the ones where people have the question of, did you even know that what you said was insulting? Did you mean that? And it starts to make people question their experiences. Now, even more insidious than that are the micro-invalidations. Micro-invalidations happen when people with target identities have their whole experiences dismissed or minimized. They may be told that they're being too sensitive or they're reading too much into a situation. And that's not fair. They're being told that what you just said happened didn't happen. Now, I want you to look back into the participation program and let me know what questions
Can you resend that link just in case?
I don't know how.
Oh, I can take care of it. Actually, I see it at the top. I'll do it.
Thank you. Yes, I can't see the Google Meet screen and be on the slide screen, sorry. Now the questions in the participation program give you anonymity. But if you have a question and you're not quite comfortable with the technology, feel free to raise your hand in the reactions are just on the screen, and Professor PH will ask you to unmute and say your question out loud.
So I'm just going to ask you a question to get the ball rolling, Anita.
Sure.
My question is that you had mentioned that microaggressions actually can reduce life expectancy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and where, kind of that whys and how fors? Because I don't think people quite realize how crazy this can be, and I know this was surprising to me, and I'd love for you to talk a little more on that.
Well, because this is more about interrupting them, I didn't memorize the stats, but real quick and dirty, here's the thing. All kinds of stress create bodily reactions, you know? So if you are running late for a meeting, your heart will pump a little bit faster. You will have some cortisol that is released into your body, and that helps you run faster if you were in the wild. It generally does not actually help you with getting traffic or remembering where your keys are, but way back when we first started to develop societies, having cortisol in our system was helpful for physical survival. Microaggressions cause stress. So if something happens to a person during the day and they're not sure whether it was an overt threat, they're not sure if it was an implied threat, they're not sure if maybe they were misunderstanding, your body is stressed by that and it will create more levels of cortisol. Cortisol has been shown to degrade other cells in our body. And so high levels of cortisol can lead to liver damage, can lead to actual cardiac damage. High levels of cortisol can bring on a panic attack. And panic attacks also create some respiratory distress, as well as blood pressure problems. So one of the resources that will be in the link will take you to more of that, but I didn't memorize it. Thank you for asking that clarifying.
I don't think you need to memorize it. That was exactly what I was wondering if it had to do with cortisol, so, and stress. So wonderful.
No problem. All right. Before we move on, I want you to take a moment and notice, where are you in your learning edge? I want you to notice, how are you holding your shoulders? How are you holding your jaw? How are you holding your hands? Is anything stressful? What are some of the things that your thoughts are focusing on right now? Notice those, and I'm going to invite you to go ahead and take a brief break if you need to right now. We're halfway through. When you get back from break, we're going to move into bystander and superstarring. Then we'll move on to the next steps. But please take 5 minutes for yourself now. During break, I will be still here on screen. So if anybody has questions or you want to just share some of your own stories, I'll be here to listen. So please do.
And I think we ironed out our technical issues. Some people were unable to reconnect, and I was handling some things in the background. So good to go.
Awesome. Appreciate it. I think it is really interesting the way that different programs capture more of your camera, because I'm noticing that in this program, you can see all of the things to my side, whereas in Zoom, you couldn't. Professor PH, I just sent you that link. I'm going to, when we get to actually doing our audio play, I will want that dropped into the chat if you don't mind. And where is the chat on this program? I do very little in Google Meet, so it's like, I am getting the opportunity to learn.
And Google Meet was our bread and butter during the pandemic because we're a Google system. So the chat button, if you go to at the very bottom, you'll see some shapes.
Ah, yes, I see it. It's a square.
Right next to that. So.
Got you.
And that toggles back and forth, which is kind of cool.
Are you allowed to do direct messages to people, or is it just open chat to everybody?
You know what? I think if you click participant, nope. That is one thing that we lose.
Gotcha.
I'll put my cell back number up here if people want to instant message me.
Fair enough. Given 3 more minutes to break.
And I have a message from Diane, but I think I see Diane on the chat. So were you able to get back in and everything is fine now?
Yes, thank you.
Beautiful.
Yes.
This is actually the new workshop best practice that I'm seeing, because the work I do with Braver Angels and stuff, every single workshop now has a tech person so that the presenter can focus. And I think it's a wonderful addition.
I do too, honestly. And I appreciate that you have been my tech guru for several of my workshops.
Yeah. You just let me come along for the ride.
We have a lot of fun when we work together. And so I'm glad that during break, people are able to get a feel for what some of those conversations may be like.
Speaking of, check your email after. Matt sent you a message.
That's my husband. You. I most definitely will. Now, We had a brief pause for changing over to this program. Want to know, are we still on for ending at 2:30? Okay, perfect.
I thought it was 2 o'clock. I'm sorry. But
2 o'clock?
Oh, that would be 90 minutes, wouldn't it?
Math.
yeah, but I'm not trying to cut you short, Anita, you know.
Fair enough. No, I just realized in my calendar, I always give myself 30 minutes after an event. And so I was just glancing at the calendar and realized, oh, yes. So the 2:30 is my 30-minute window of cushion, because when we gather, I like to be able to stay afterwards and answer any questions or, follow up on comments that I've heard. So I like to build that into my time. And it makes it less likely that I won't show up to my next event late if I give myself that cushion.
Well,
I'm going.
appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Richard, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I'd go on ahead,
So,
Anita.
Yep. So I'm going to bring us back to active session, and knowing that the event lasts till 2, I think this will be perfect timing for us to start to practice some of this information. All right, really quickly, I would like to know who is nervous about speaking up and interrupting any type of microaggression that you see. Who has been uncomfortable being a bystander before? If you just raise your hand so I can see, is this something that is a problem for people in this room? Oh, interesting and good to know. Uh, it will definitely tell you if it's turning off your raised hand here. Okay, I am glad to know I saw at least 5 hands go up. So I want to say thank you for being brave. Now, we're going to move forward. And in this moving forward, you're going to get to know some of the techniques, and you're going to get an opportunity to actually practice using one. So that gets a little bit easier. Now, one of the things, oh, perfect. I am so glad that y'all are still in the slides. That did not get disrupted. Now, I'm going to share my screen because we're going to also get into the techniques, and I want you to be able to see the notes for those. Okay, so the scariest thing about speaking up that people feel, yep, I don't know what to say. What if I make people angry? All of these are very, very valid concerns. And I want to say that speaking up should be a decision that you make at the time as you are evaluating what is the safety of speaking up. What are the power dynamics that are in motion here in the situation? Sometimes it is better to say nothing right then in the situation and just offer comfort and support to whoever is suffering the microaggressions. Oh, spelling error. Sorry, the inner editor in me just got offended. But sometimes it's better to know, okay, I need to do this over email, or I need to do this one-on-one. But for those times when it is physically safe to speak up and you want to be able to start interrupting, there are some techniques that you can take action so that you don't have to freeze up. All right. So the very first type is called XYZ. Maybe. XYZ is a very straightforward sentence formula. I feel X when Y because Z. Here's some examples of how that can look. I feel uncomfortable, that's your X, when I hear those comments, that's your Y, because they're not here to explain or defend their decision, that's your Z. I feel shady when that team isn't included in planning because this affects them too. I get nervous when people are labeled because it makes me wonder how you see me and what you say when I'm not around. Very simple statements of feeling and explanation of your feeling. Another technique you can use to speak up is open the front door. So you share what you observed. And in this case, it might be something like, I just saw a guy stand up and try and intimidate the speaker with his larger body size. I think that's inappropriate and unfair. I feel really disappointed that at my age, I still am dealing with bullies. I really hope that in the future, if you disagree with someone, you can do so in a softer voice. Observe, think, feel, and then the desired change that you hope for. Another technique is with my friend Laura. Listen with your heart until you can connect with whatever they're talking about. Sometimes in reproductive rights conversations, the discussion can get very, very heated. And so one way that you can listen with your heart until you connect them is maybe on the value of life is precious. And once you find that that is a value that you are hearing being mirrored, then you can say, I agree with you. I think life is precious too. So you have listened, you have found something you can truly, authentically connect with, and then you affirm it. You agree with it. You speak on, yes, this is something we have in common. And then you respond. Then you respond to the issue they raised. So perhaps if it's about some of the timeframes of the most recent abortion laws that have gone out, if they've been talking about that, maybe a response is, but in something this big and this important of a life decision, I don't think that rushing it and trying to make that decision within a very short time period is really the best idea, because that's what the issue is, right? And then you provide some new information that might help them consider a new perspective. You add information. I was talking to some teenagers, and I told them, do you know that most women don't actually know that they should take a pregnancy test until about 7 weeks, 8 weeks in? And so those laws that say you can't have an abortion before 8 or 9 weeks are pretty unfair, because oftentimes those people don't know they're pregnant. So you listen until you can connect with a value that they share. You affirm whatever you found that you connect with. You respond to the issue, and then you add new information. Our final technique is taking action. Ask questions. Clarify, what just happened? Did you just do that? Ask with curiosity. I'm not sure what you were trying to accomplish when you said that. Can you tell me more about it? I saw you lean forward, get very close to their face while you were talking very loudly. I think that must have been very uncomfortable, and that's going to make it hard for us to have productive conversations at these meetings. Then you own your own thoughts and feelings. I feel like I can't talk to you if that's how you'll react. I am very uncomfortable right now. And then next, suggest a more appropriate response in the future. So maybe we could take a break while you calm down, and then we can revisit this topic later. Take action is a little bit more of an in-depth version of open the front door. Okay, so I want to go ahead and drop the handouts into the chat so that people have that, because we're now getting to some of the things that people get very uncomfortable about. What happens if you're the one that did the microaggression? What if you microaggressed? So how do you correct it? You apologize. And then you start to rebuild the relationship. An important thing to consider, if somebody does mention that you had a problematic statement or that your behavior was making them uncomfortable, that doesn't mean that they think you're a horrible human being. In fact, it probably means the opposite if they bother to speak on it to you. Most people don't take the opportunity to say, that hurt my feelings, that bothered me, if they don't think that the relationship is worth preserving. They don't think that you are somebody that is worthy of continuing to interact with. They'll just ignore it, sweep it under the rug, and basically start to write you off. So if somebody actually brings out, hey, this bothered me, then really listen to them. Show humility and understand that they want this relationship to be better as well. When you're getting this feedback, show caring and openness. You might want to be defensive, of course. Nobody likes to be told that they did something wrong. But if you can actively try and stay open, lean in a caring way, say the words, I appreciate you talking to me about this. Acknowledge that they took a risk, because there is a risk in approaching somebody and mentioning a mistake that they have made. But to also try and accept that they probably have more expertise on what offends them. Listen, listen, and more listen. Don't make excuses. Don't say you meant no harm. Don't attempt to prove you're a good person by telling them of awards you've won or friends you have or anything else that you have done in your own social justice journey. Just apologize sincerely and keep trying to be better. Okay, finally, it is okay to say, I don't understand. It is okay to say, can you please explain it to me again? It is also okay for them to say, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Please Google it. But it is fair for you to ask for help understanding their perspective, just like it's fair for them to say, I don't have the emotional energy to explain this more. But keep in mind that we're all human. We're all doing the best that we can with what we know. And so there's a possibility that you're going to make mistakes. Accept it with humility and just keep trying. Now, we have an audio play, and this is where I'm asking everybody to lean in. In your chat, you have the actual techniques. Those have been included in that for you. And
actually, I don't have it yet because you sent me I need a copy of that Google link. I have you sent me the Google Meet link. That. Yeah.
Oh,
it's all
I'm
good.
sorry. Well, let's see.
If you go to share,
I am actually going to stick it in the chat.
Perfect.
And just so y'all have an idea of what it looks like, can you see my document now? I see people signing in. Yes, okay. Now, this situation that I have that's going to give you practice and help you build confidence with using these techniques will work best if everybody remembers those community guidelines that we set up for how we're going to talk. Everybody remembers to be non-judgmental and supportive of the people who volunteer. I think that'll be the best way that we'll all be able to learn. This workshop is your opportunity to feel awkward and uncertain, and please lean into that discomfort. It means you're learning, and also, isn't it better to practice awkwardly going through these techniques now than when you're actually in the situation when you need it? So I need 2 brave people to start us off. And when you volunteer, you are volunteering to start off our situation. We're going to see the scenario. And in this scenario, we'll have a superstar and we will have a microaggressor. The superstar is going to practice the interrupting techniques, and the microaggressor is going to practice the recovery techniques. So as we move forward, I might interrupt you and say, can you use the XYZ technique for that? I might ask the microaggressor, can you try recovering with a different technique by sincerity or asking for more understanding? And so this way, you'll have as many times to try techniques, see other people's styles, etc. Now, like I said, this is a performance, but there's a twist. You may remember being in grade school and having to be part of the Christmas pageant or, you know, the President's Day play. And if you didn't know what you were supposed to say, you could say, line, and then perhaps a teacher or parent would whisper, you're supposed to say blah, 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 blah. We're going to do that here today. So at any point in the performance, the superstar or the microaggressor can say line, and then they will stop being the volunteer and somebody else will step in to take their place. And then we will be able to see how they might deal with that situation. If you get flustered, you don't know how to move forward, it's okay to yell line, and the next person will step in and we'll see what they have to offer. Now, I know that this is a hard subject, but try to have fun, have a sense of play about your role. This is your opportunity to experiment. Now, here's your situation, and I still need 2 volunteers to start us off. Just be less intense. Situation is you are walking on campus with a friend. You see a flyer advertising the Jeffco Pride celebration. Your friend gets really angry and starts talking about how hard it is to always have that stuff dragged into view. And it would just be better if those people would be less intense. What do you say? How do you address this? I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop the presenting so that I can see the screen. For my 2 volunteers, do I have 2 people willing to start us off? For others, when you hear line, at that point, raise your hand to let us know that you are willing to step in and take their place. Tara, or is it Tara? Tara, are you a volunteer for us? We need 1 more.
Kara may have had her hand up from a previous activity as well.
Gotcha.
That's been up for a while.
Thank you. Okay, Richard's volunteering, and I think Tara has stepped out, so she can't hear us saying that she's volunteering. So I'm going to ask, is there anybody else that wants to be brave since she is not here to consent? Thank you, I appreciate it. All right.
That's Saranda.
Thank you, Saranda, another diversity committee member. Appreciate it. All right. So the scenario is in the chat. Which one of you would like to be our superstar and which one wants to be the microaggressor? Both have skills to learn.
I'll be the bad guy. I shouldn't have said that though, right?
All right. So y'all are seeing a flyer that's, advertising Jeffco Pride. And Richard makes an unfortunate comment that he wishes those people would be just a little less intense about things. Saranda, what do you say? How do you interrupt this microaggression?
I think I'm going to do the take action. So I think I'm going to ask, Richard, can you explain to me a little bit more about what do you mean by they would wish to be a little less intense? I don't fully understand what that means.
Okay. I used to feel this way. I don't feel this way now, so I'm going to go back 10 years. Okay. 10 years ago, Richard, and say, who cares about sexual orientation? Why don't you just keep it to yourself? Why don't they just keep it to themselves? I don't know. I don't know what their sexual orientation is unless I ask, so why do you got to advertise it?
Thank you. Saranda?
Trying to figure out how to do the curiosity instead of judgment. I'm not that the judgment is the first thing that pops in my mind, much more of the curiosity. Like, how do you be curious? I guess I'm asking for a line.
Thank you. Line.
I'm curious why this bothers you so much.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Thank you. Richard, why does it bother you so much?
Because who cares what someone's sexual orientation is? What, just that's your personal business. As long as you don't bother me, I don't care what. But why do you have to go out and advertise that your sexual preference? It's none of my business. I don't need to know. That's the old Richard, okay?
Right. That's a very common common conversation in this space. How do you respond to that part?
Okay, Richard. So what I'm hearing you kind of say is sexual orientation is like a private matter. It doesn't need to be public. It doesn't need to be shared. And that's kind of why, when you saw the flyer, that's kind of why you, that's why you said the comment you said.
That's right. It's none of my business. Personal. Keep that to you. What you do in the bedroom is your business. I don't need to know what you do.
Okay. So I think for me, it's one of those things where the LGBTQ community was put in the dark for so long with history that, and I think maybe people want to feel, share their pride in who they are and their sexual orientation, because for so long it was so, and still to this day, it can be detrimental to share who you are with the world for fear of safety. So I think maybe that's why there's a flyer for the Just for Pride, just so people can celebrate who they are.
Can I switch to a good guy for a second, or do I have to stay bad guy?
Let's see if you can recover and move to a superstar. So yes, how would you do that?
You mean how? I mean, I've recovered. I don't think that way anymore.
But in this conversation, yeah.
I was trying to add to what Saranda said.
Oh, yes, go for it.
It has to be tremendous pressure to where you can't be with someone you love because of who you are. If a person loves another person, it shouldn't matter. And it's got to be a lot of pressure to try to hold that in, especially people, imagine celebrities.
Yes.
Because teenage idol, like who's the guy that was with Wham? He's dead.
George Michael.
George Michael, yeah. He had girls screaming for him, and he wasn't interested in girls, but he had to keep that in, and that apparently really messed him up really bad. Elton John.
Yes.
So that's a lot of pressure. People should be able to express themselves. Trying to hide that is not good, and it's led to suicide and other things. So I had to switch to help my sister out here.
Thank you. Now, here's a question. Y'all have had this conversation. You're still walking on campus. She has enlightened you on all of that information, and you now understand that what you said was problematic. Yes. How would you start the apology piece and the rebuilding that relationship with her?
I would say I apologize. I should have said that. I kind of see your point now in a way that I didn't see it before.
Thank you.
I never looked at it that way.
Very nice. That piece of adding new information is a very crucial piece of all of these recovery spots. To be able to not judge, just asking questions and then giving more information. But at the same time, in the middle between asking the questions and giving more information, there's that piece where you share impact. You say, well, for, decades, people have been committing suicides because they can't express who they are for real. That's an impact. I don't feel safe having this conversation with you because you seem to lose your temper quickly. That's an impact. So making sure that between the questions and the new information, you are giving the person something to think about and understanding of how maybe their worldview and what they just shared has a negative impact on other people. Most human beings don't want to be evil. Most human beings aren't trying to walk around hurting people's feelings, spreading disrespect, and making people feel excluded. And so that's an important piece to remember. I want to thank you so much to my volunteers, both of you. I appreciate it. These are some tools. They're not the only tools, but these are some tools. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the slideshow and take any final questions. Thank you. Have a great weekend, Richard. Now, it's important that y'all know, and Richard was a great example of that this is lifelong learning. This is something that you're going to keep learning new ways to handle. You're going to keep changing your perspectives. He said that ago, he didn't feel that way. And then as he had more conversations, as he learned more, he was able to change his perspective, and now he's able to be an ally to the queer community. And so that's really important. Being a superstar isn't about being better than other people. It's not about being self-righteous. It's about making the world a place where people feel more comfortable bringing their whole selves to the party. It's a process, and it's not always easy or comfortable. If you remember, lots of you felt like you don't want to make people angry or that you won't know how to do it right. And so lean in, expect to make mistakes, but keep trying. And I think that's really an important thing to remember. If inclusion and equity was easy, America would have solved it like 2 decades ago, or 2 generations ago, I apologize. We would have figured that out already, but we haven't because it's not easy. It is a lot of unconscious bias baked into our personal lives, but also into our nation's lifeline. So it's going to take some time, but be patient with yourself. Now, these are a couple of resources. There will be more resources when you actually get the slide deck, but I want to remind people that it doesn't matter how many lists I make. It's important that you follow you do your own exploring. However, as you're collecting new information, make sure that you are fact-checking through academic journals, that you are checking in with people who have those target identities. And so you're not necessarily just finding the inaccurate or the disrespectful resources online. One of the reasons why I recommend that you follow links with curiosity and that you just kind of take some of the suggestions that are thrown out there is because it will also help make sure that you're not researching through your unconscious bias. Welcoming myself back to the group. I turned off screen share. I turned off screen share. There we go. Because as we're wrapping up, I want to ask if y'all would be willing to raise your hand if there are certain actions that you'll take little steps to try. Please raise your hand if you'll invite people to attend diversity, cultural, community events. If you'll go inviting people to see movies that have subtitles, if you will go to art that isn't of your general style, raise your hand if you feel like that's something that you can try and do in your life. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Put your hands down. Raise your hand if you'll make supportive comments and repost positive things in your social media. Thank you. I see people willing to take that proactive step of inclusion. All right. Thank you. Put your hands down. Raise your hand if you're willing to speak up about unfair rules, even if they don't impact you. Thank you. While we talked about interrupting microaggressions, that is a very active thing that you do in the moment. But some of these inclusive things that you all raised hands saying you were willing to try are proactive. And they are just tiny little things that you can do that will start to have big changes. Remember, other people only know the stories that they know based on their particular experiences. So if you go out of your comfort zone and go see an art exhibit about a whole different culture, you start to learn a little bit more of a story. And hopefully that means you'll be more prepared and able to actually be actively a superstar when you need to interrupt for microaggressions, or you need to actively ally with somebody who's struggling. Now I see in the chat one more question. I'm still nervous about doing something with my folks or with strangers that might physically hurt me. Any advice for those situations? Don't be around people that might physically hurt you. That is my advice. That is one of the pieces of safety that I was saying. Before you decide if you're going to speak up, before you decide, am I going to use any of these techniques, you need to evaluate for physical safety. You need to pay attention to what are the power dynamics in the situation. Sometimes interrupting your boss while they're speaking and telling them that they're being insensitive to one of the team members, that's not maybe the safest time to do it. When somebody is out of control, perhaps they are on substances, perhaps you don't know them well enough. Those are not good times to try and correct or suggest that maybe they could do things differently. So in those instances, follow-up emails are great. In those instances, finding a time where you can actually catch that person when they are in a different state of mood, and maybe talk to them when they are able to hear it better. And sometimes, quite honestly, the best thing that you can do when a microaggression is happening in front of you is say, I don't like this. I don't think that's right. I just don't think this is right. And then check on the person who's being aggressed on. How are you doing? Do you want to go over here and talk about this with me? Is there anything I can do for you? You can always offer comfort to the other person at any point, and that also is a great way to interrupt the microaggression. You change the subject and start talking to them and checking on them. It'll be very hard for somebody who is just being, maybe not as thoughtful. It's very hard for them to continue to break in to another conversation, to continue being disrespectful. So hopefully that will help. Now, I do hope that all of this has been helpful. I have one more link for you, and this is a link to the survey. The Diversity Committee and myself would like to know, how did you think this went? Is this something that you would be interested in doing again? And so there's a survey link. As soon as I cut and paste it, it will be dropped in for you. All right, maybe. Now, while I'm finding the cut and paste for the survey, does anybody want to unmute and have questions? I see some raised hands. I'm going to start at the top of my screen and go around. And Michelle, your hand is still up. I see Saranda's hand, and I think Tara's hand is still just from before. So,
and I got your survey up.
Thank you, appreciate it. Saranda, what's your question?
So I think like an example that Richard and I did, if I had gotten to the next like stage of the take action, it said like
Yes.
own your thoughts and feelings. And something I was thinking about was like, so I identify in the queer community, and in that space, I could have explained that, like, as a queer person, this is how this impacts me and things like that. But also, it's not safe to out myself all the time. And so
Exactly.
you mentioned safety earlier to Lisa's question, which is great. But I was wondering, like, how do you own your thoughts and feelings without having to like use your identity as the example every time?
Actually, I think that it's simple to say, I used to feel that way until I realized dot, dot, dot. You don't have to say, it was me. I figured out my stuff and now I want to share it with you. But you can say, I used to feel that way. I feel really upset when people ignore the fact that, I have worked on growing my hair for over 20 years and they just think of it as fat. That upsets me. I don't have to say, as a Black woman, I insist that I don't need to do all that. So just simply saying, these are my feelings. This is my experience without necessarily even coming to your identity. But most people know what it's like to have to keep a secret. Nobody likes that. So hopefully that'll help with the owning of feelings without necessarily disclosing more than you are comfortable disclosing.
Thank you.
Can I
No
offer
problem.
a help,
Yes.
Anita? So, because we work with students every day, they are a wonderful place to lean. A lot of times I'll say, a lot of our students, when they come on campus, this is the first time they've ever been around other people who are LGBTQ. And it's one of the reasons why what we do here is so important. It's like that idea of getting to a yes, where both people can understand, because anybody who works on campus, especially, hopefully they care about students. And I've literally said, look, if having this event saves one student's life, I feel like it's worth it, even if it might theoretically make some people uncomfortable. Um, I don't know if that's helpful, but I will try to do that because, like I said, I have a child who's non-binary. It's not my. They have given me permission to use them. They say that a lot. But if I didn't have that permission, I would have to be. I could just say kids or students or people I've known. I don't know if that's helpful to you.
I think that's a great technique, actually. One of the reasons why I started off saying I'm a story sharer is because I have the luxury of hearing a whole bunch of people's a whole bunch of people's stories during my therapy sessions, and so I am able to say, well, I've heard from a lot of people your age, or I've heard from a lot of couples that are going through similar things, and so what I hear a lot of are blah 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 blah. And so leaning into other people's stories and helping folks understand and normalize feeling confused, not feeling like they fit in, feeling like it's frustrating and they don't know how to handle things. The more normalizing that we can make it for people to understand they're not alone, I think that's helpful. Any other questions or concerns about interrupting microaggressions from the group? I really have to say I appreciate so many of you transitioning from the initial platform over here to this platform and being patient with us as far as our technical difficulties. I do have a question
Oh, really quick,
about a
Miss Anita
question.
has a question. Oh,
Yes,
so
I have a
sorry.
question about the question. Yes. Julie, can you talk a little bit more about the word religion, what you were responding to or referencing when you typed it?
A lot of people that I know have an aggression, a bias, whatever, will often go to their religion. It's against their religion. In the Bible, it says that. And so honestly, I do usually don't confront. I don't. I save a space for them and pray that they will find the right answers. But that's where I hit that stumbling block because I'm not going to fight somebody on their religion. And many times it falls on deaf ears. So that's what I meant by that.
I understand, and you're right. There's no reason, there's no reason for you to fight anybody. Just bringing up that there's another way of thinking about it. I often, when people say, well, this is my religious belief, I say my faith is important to me too. And the God that I learned about is loving and told me that judgment is not my job. And so I lean into kindness. If I can be kind to a couple that is trying to parent their child the best way possible, I can do that and worry that God's going to sort out the rules. That's not my job. And so I like when you say that you pray for them that they'll find answers. That's amazing, and that's non-judgmental. But speak to that. If somebody says, well, it's just what I believe because my faith teaches me, lean into your faith or what you understand about their faith and say, well, I thought God was love. And so is there a way that we can be more godlike on this subject and leave God's job to God? Does that help somewhat?
Yes, it does. And thank you, because it kind of reinforced, because a lot of times I do go to, it's not my place to judge. That's up to God. It's not me that judges. I cannot place judgment on anyone. And so I kind of try to lead with that example and model that behavior. And then, yeah, I am not a confrontational person at all. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you so much. We are after 2 o'clock, and so I appreciate that y'all have stayed for these last comments. Hope everyone has a great weekend. And if you enjoyed this and think that the diversity committee should bring me back for some more, I would be honored to rejoin you. Now, I think all of our diversity. Yes, please do. I think all of our diversity committee members are gone, so we are left to shut down the room. Want to make sure that the audience doesn't have any more questions or comments. Thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Please do.
Susan, click the corrected link. It should be the second one down. I accidentally put the wrong one in. It's my fault.
Thank you, everybody. And please do take the survey so that we can continue to improve. Now, I have one last thing, and I think I'll send it to you directly, and that is the link to the actual slides with the participation. Thank you so much for staying, and y'all have a great weekend. I will talk to everybody when I get invited back. Bye.